It happened on a Tuesday. The kind of Tuesday that has no reason to be anything other than ordinary. I was in the middle of folding laundry when I heard the front door handle twist. Not a knock. Not a doorbell. Just the slow, deliberate sound of someone trying to get in without being invited. My whole body went still. I set down the shirt in my hands and stood there in the quiet of my apartment, listening. Then I heard my mother's voice through the door, low and certain, the way she sounds when she's already decided how something is going to go. It's fine. I have a key. My stomach dropped. I walked to the door before she could use it. I turned the deadbolt from the inside, the one I'd installed myself 2 weeks ago, and I stood there with my hand pressed flat against the wood. 3 seconds passed. Then the knock came, hard. The kind that's not really asking. Claire, open the door. We need to talk. I looked through the peephole. My mother stood in the hallway with her arms crossed, purse hooked over one elbow. Behind her, my older brother Marcus leaned against the wall like he'd been here 100 times and planned to be here 100 more. And next to him, rolling a suitcase, was my sister-in-law Dana, already looking around the hallway like she was deciding where to put furniture. I took one long breath. Then I opened the door. "What is this?" I said. It wasn't a question. My mother pushed past me without answering. Marcus followed. Dana wheeled her suitcase inside and let it clunk against the hardwood floor of the entryway like she'd just arrived at a hotel. "We talked about this," my mother said, already moving toward the kitchen. "Dana and Marcus need a place while the renovation finishes. You have the second bedroom. You're barely ever home anyway." I stood by the door, still holding the handle. "I never agreed to that." "You didn't disagree," Marcus said. "He was doing that thing where he smiles but his eyes don't move. Mom said you were fine with it." "I never said that." "Claire," my mother set her purse on my counter. "My counter, you're being dramatic. It's family. It's temporary. 3 months at the most. Dana's already given notice at their old place." I looked at Dana. She had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable, but she didn't back toward the door. She unzipped the top pocket of her suitcase and took out a phone charger. She was already looking for an outlet. That was the moment I understood. This wasn't a conversation. It was an installation. I said very clearly, "You need to leave, all of you, right now." The silence that followed had a texture to it. My mother's expression shifted from certain to offended so fast, I almost missed the moment between them. "This is not how you talk to your family," she said. "This is my home," I said. "You don't get to walk in here with a suitcase and call it a conversation." Marcus laughed once. Short and dismissive. "It's not even really yours, Claire. Mom co-signed." And there it was. She hadn't co-signed. She'd wanted to. She'd offered, loudly and repeatedly when I was closing on the apartment 18 months ago. I'd said no. I had the paperwork to prove it. My name, alone, on every document. But Marcus saying it like it was fact told me everything about what my family had apparently decided was true. I opened the door wider and stood beside it. "I want you to leave," I said again, "and take the suitcase." Dana finally looked at my mother. Something passed between them. My mother picked up her purse slowly, the way people do when they want you to know they're not done with you yet. "You're going to regret treating us this way," she said. "Maybe," I said. "But you're still leaving." They left. Marcus didn't look at me on the way out. Dana pulled her suitcase back across the threshold and the wheel caught on the door frame, and she yanked it hard like it was my fault. My mother was last. She paused in the doorway and looked at me with that expression she has, the one that's been making me feel guilty since I was 7 years old. "I raised you," she said. "I know," I said, and I closed the door. I stood alone in my apartment for a full minute before I exhaled. "My name is Claire Navarro. I'm 31 years old. I work as a registered nurse at a hospital in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I had been working since I was 16. Not because my family was poor, because I understood early that money and independence were the same thing, and that if I wanted to have one, I needed to build the other myself." I should tell you about Marcus. Marcus is 6 years older than me, and for as long as I can remember, he has been the sun that my mother orbits. He is charming the way people are charming when they've never had to try very hard. He's never held a job longer than 2 years, never paid a bill that wasn't already past due, and has, over the course of his life, borrowed a sum from my mother that I've stopped calculating because the number makes my chest tight. He married Dana 3 years ago. She is the only person I'd ever met who can make Marcus feel like the responsible one in a relationship. I don't say any of this with bitterness. I say it because you need to understand what my family's economy looks like from the inside. There are people who give and people who receive, and somewhere around age 14 I realized which category everyone had silently assigned me to. The good grades, the scholarship, the nursing degree, the apartment I'd saved for 4 years to buy. Every achievement of mine had always been received by my mother with this specific kind of pride that tipped slightly into ownership, like she wanted to take some credit, like my accomplishments were something she'd earned by raising me. I never thought that attitude would turn into a crowbar, or in this case, a suitcase. I should have known something was building. The signs were there if I'd bothered to look. It started 8 months before that Tuesday when my mother mentioned very casually over Sunday dinner that Marcus and Dana's apartment lease was ending. "They're thinking of buying," she said. She passed the bread basket without looking at me, "but the market's just terrible right now. Everything's so expensive." I said. "They just need something temporary. A bridge, really, a few months to save up." I didn't respond to that specifically. I talked about something else. I thought I'd handled it. 2 months later, she brought it up again. Had I thought about it? Didn't they have that second bedroom? Wasn't it just being wasted? "It's my office," I said. "You could put a desk in the living room." "I don't want to." She changed the subject. I thought again that I'd handled it. What I didn't realize was that while I was saying no in the most careful, polite way possible, my mother was telling Marcus and Dana yes, not maybe, not we'll see. Yes, she'd told them I agreed, or that I would agree, or that I just didn't know yet that I agreed. I don't know the exact version she gave them, but by the time they showed up at my door with Dana's suitcase, they had both clearly been living inside a version of reality where this was already settled. That's the thing about certain families. They don't negotiate. They just build the facts they want until those facts are large enough to walk through your front door. The week after the incident, my phone became a full-time job. My mother called every morning. She had, as I expected, told her version of what happened to everyone who would listen. The Claire in her version was cold, unreasonable, and had turned her own family away in a time of need. The suitcase didn't appear in her version. The lack of any prior real agreement didn't appear either. My aunt texted me, "Honey, I heard what happened. Your mom is devastated." A cousin from Tampa posted something vague on Facebook about family loyalty and people who forget where they came from. She tagged my mother. 17 of my mother's church friends liked it. I put my phone face down on the kitchen table and left it there for most of the day. Marcus called once. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail that was 3 minutes long and contained the phrases, "You always do this. You've always thought you were better than us, and Mom gave up everything for you." I saved it to a folder on my phone labeled simply Receipts. Dana texted me directly. One message. "I just want you to know I feel really unwelcome in this family because of you." I read it twice. I didn't reply. What I did instead was go to my home office. My actual office, where my desk was, where my desk was where I paid my bills and kept my files. And I pulled out my mortgage paperwork. I read through every page. My name. My income verification. My credit score. My down payment, $24,000, which had taken me 4 years and several missed vacations to save. Not a single line with my mother's signature. Not a single line with my mother's signature. Not a single line with anyone's name but mine. I photographed every page. I uploaded the photos to cloud storage. I labeled the folder Ownership. I didn't know yet what I was going to need it for. But I was a nurse. I knew what it meant when a patient's vitals started trending the wrong direction. You didn't wait for the crash to start taking notes. 3 weeks after they showed up at my door, I got a piece of mail that stopped me cold. It was addressed to me, but underneath my name was a second line, and Marcus Navarro, occupant. It was from the building's property management company, a form about annual lease renewal notifications for the building's tenant roster. Routine paperwork. Except Marcus Navarro had never lived in my apartment. Marcus Navarro was not on any document related to my apartment. Marcus Navarro's name had no business being in any correspondence sent to my address. I called the property management office that afternoon. The woman I spoke with was apologetic and slightly confused. She said a form had been submitted 2 months ago updating the household contact list. The person who submitted it had listed themselves as a cohabitant and secondary contact. The name on the submission was my mother. I asked her to read me the date of submission. It was the week after my mother and I had the second conversation about Marcus and Dana needing a place to stay, the conversation where I'd said no. I thanked the woman. I asked her to reverse the change and document that the submission had not been made with my knowledge or consent. She said she would send a written confirmation. I asked for it in email. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time after that call. Not angry yet, just very, very still. My mother had submitted paperwork adding Marcus to my building's records. She had done this without telling me. She had done this while I was still under the impression we were simply having a disagreement about house guests. She wasn't having a disagreement, she was building a paper trail. I called my friend Renee that evening. Renee is a paralegal, and she is constitutionally incapable of sugarcoating anything, which is one of the reasons I've kept her close for 11 years. "Tell me I'm overreacting," I said. She was quiet for longer than I'd have liked. "I can't do that. Renee, Claire, listen to me. What she did with the management company, that's one thing. Annoying, fixable, but I want you to think hard. Have you ever given your mother any written authorization to act on your behalf? Anything? A lease form, a banking form, any kind of document where you listed her as a contact or an agent?" I thought, and then I remembered. 18 months ago, when I was in the middle of closing on the apartment, I'd been working a brutal stretch of overnight shifts at the hospital. The closing process had a dozen small logistical tasks I was barely keeping up with. My mother had offered to help. She'd picked up a certified mail package from the post office for me once, when I was stuck at work. I'd given her a one-time written note authorizing her to sign for the package on my behalf. A single handwritten line on my own note paper. My mother, Linda Navarro, is authorized to pick up my certified mail package on date. I explained this to Renee. "Okay," she said slowly. "That specific note, for a single package with a specific date, isn't dangerous by itself. But I want you to think about whether she could have used it to represent herself as having general authority. Did she make copies? Was there any other context where she could have presented that note to someone?" I didn't know. I realized I didn't know because I'd written it and handed it to her without thinking twice, the way you hand your mother a piece of note paper because she's your mother, and you're sleep-deprived, and you trust her. "What do I do?" I asked. "Document everything," Renee said. "All of it. The management company situation, the voicemails, the texts, the original exchange about Marcus staying with you. Write down every conversation you remember with dates. And Claire, check your credit." I pulled up my credit report at 11 o'clock that night. There was a soft inquiry on my report from a mortgage lender I didn't recognize. Dated 6 weeks ago. The inquiry was tied to a pre-qualification request. My credit had been checked by a mortgage company. Without my knowledge. The name attached to the inquiry was mine. I won't tell you I was calm. I sat on my bathroom floor for about 20 minutes doing controlled breathing the way you do when a patient's family is screaming at you and you need your hands to stay steady. Then I got up, went back to my desk, and started making phone calls. The mortgage company was closed for the evening. I called Renee back. "How fast can you look something up tomorrow?" I asked. "Depends," she said. "What am I looking for?" "Whether someone can submit a pre-qualification inquiry using my name and information without my signature." Silence. Then, "Claire, how hard did they want this apartment?" I didn't answer. I think we both already knew. The next morning, I was at the mortgage company's branch when they opened. I spoke with a loan officer named Patrick, who was trying hard to be helpful and clearly uncomfortable. He confirmed that a pre-qualification inquiry had been initiated under my name and Social Security number 6 weeks prior. The application had listed a co-borrower, Marcus Navarro. The stated purpose was refinancing an existing residential property. My property. The application had been flagged and not processed because the signature on the submitted authorization form had not matched my signature on file from my original mortgage documentation. The discrepancy had been noted, the file had been closed, and a routine notification had been sent to my address, which, I now understood, was the piece of mail I'd nearly missed because it looked like junk. I asked Patrick to give me a written statement documenting the attempted inquiry, the flag, and the closure of the file. He asked if I wanted to report it formally. I said not yet. I said I needed to understand what I was dealing with first. I drove home with the statement on the passenger seat and both hands too tight on the wheel. They had tried to refinance my apartment. They had tried to put Marcus on my mortgage. They had done this while I thought we were arguing about a guest bedroom. I want to tell you what happened at my brother's birthday dinner. Because it matters. 2 weeks after I found out about the inquiry, my mother called and asked me to come. Family dinner, she said. Nothing serious. Just celebrating Marcus. She sounded completely normal, like none of it had happened. I almost didn't go. Renee told me not to go. But something in me needed to see what they were going to do with a room full of witnesses. The table was full when I arrived. Extended family. My mother's oldest friend, Patrice, Dana's parents, who had met twice and didn't particularly trust. My mother had cooked for hours, I could tell. The food was the elaborate kind she only makes when she wants people to feel like they owe her something. She waited until we were all midway through the meal. I have a little announcement, she said, raising her wine glass. Marcus and Dana have some exciting news. Marcus smiled. Dana smiled. I didn't. They found a place, my mother said. It's a beautiful apartment. Very well maintained. Good building. Close to family. She was looking directly at me when she said it. I set down my fork. It'll just be temporary while they finalize their own purchase, she continued, still looking at me. 3 months. 4 at the most. And since we're family, and since Claire's always been such a giving person. No, I said. The table went quiet. Claire, no. I kept my voice level. I had 2 weeks to prepare for this moment. I know about the mortgage inquiry, Mom. I know about the property management form. I have both in writing. My mother's face didn't move for a full second. Then it rearranged itself into confusion. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. Marcus put his glass down. You're making a scene. You tried to refinance my apartment, I said, looking at him directly. Under both our names. Without my permission. The application was flagged because the signature didn't match. Dana looked at Marcus. He looked at my mother. My mother looked at me with an expression I'd never seen from her before. Not anger, not guilt, but something colder. The face of a person recalculating. That was just an exploratory conversation, she said. We were looking at options. You submitted documentation, I said. With my name on it. You're being paranoid. Her voice sharpened. Everything was above board. You're twisting this. Patrice was staring at the tablecloth. Dana's parents were finding their water glasses very interesting. My aunt reached over and quietly touched my arm, not to stop me but just to let me know she was there. I didn't know until later how much that small gesture meant. I have copies of everything, I said. The inquiry, the flag, the property management change, every voicemail Marcus has left me, every text from Dana. I paused. I also have a copy of the original closing documents on my apartment. My name only. No cosigners. Not a single signature that isn't mine. My mother stood up. This is not the time or the place. You chose the time and the place, I said quietly. I'm just the one who showed up with proof. I pushed back my chair and picked up my bag. The room felt electric, the way rooms do when something has been said that cannot be unsaid. I love you. I said to my mother, and I meant it, which is what made it so hard to say the next part. But I'm not going to let you walk into what I built and hand it to someone else. Not for 3 months. Not for 3 weeks. Not for one night. I walked out into the cold air and sat in my car for a long time before I drove anywhere. The next few days were ugly in the way family fallout always is. Not loud, just everywhere. My phone had 14 missed calls by the time I woke up the morning after the dinner. Not all from my mother. Marcus called 4 times. Dana called twice, which surprised me. Patrice, bless her, sent a single text. You handled that better than I would have. I called Renee. I told her everything. Okay, she said. Here's what happens now. You file a complaint with the mortgage lender formally. You contact your building's management company again and request a written audit of any forms submitted in connection with your unit going back 2 years. And you call your bank today and put a fraud alert on your accounts. Do you think they actually committed fraud? She exhaled. I think they walked as close to the line as they could. The signature flag is the thing that stops it from being clear-cut. But Claire? The intent was there. And intent documented is better than intent assumed. I did all of it, took most of a day off to do it. Filed a complaint with the lender, got the written audit from the management company, which confirmed my mother had submitted 2 separate forms, the occupant update and a secondary contact authorization, neither of which I had approved. Set up a fraud alert, locked my credit through all 3 bureaus. I also, at Renee's suggestion, wrote up a 4-page document. Just facts. Dates, names, what was said, what was submitted, what was found. Not emotional. Not a complaint. Just a record that a thing had happened in case I ever needed to prove it. I labeled it control. The same word felt right. My mother called on a Thursday afternoon, 10 days after the dinner. I answered. She was quiet for a moment, the way she is when she's been rehearsing. Then she said, "I want to apologize for how things have gone." I waited. "Dana and Marcus put me in a difficult position," she said. "They needed help and I wanted to give it to them, and I may have gotten ahead of myself." It wasn't a full apology, it was the shape of one. But I knew my mother, and I knew this was the closest she was going to come without someone making her. "I know you worked hard for that apartment," she said. "I do know that." "Then why?" I asked. Just that. She was quiet for a long time. "Because he's my son," she finally said. "And I've always believed that when you have something, you share it with family." "I have shared," I said. "I paid for Marcus's car registration twice. I covered his phone bill for 8 months. I lent Dana money for her grandmother's funeral that I never saw again. I have shared, Mom. What I won't do is hand over the roof over my head." She didn't say anything. "I'm not going to punish you for this," I said. "But I need you to understand it's over. There is no version of this conversation that ends with Marcus and Dana having a key to my apartment. That's not me being cold. That's just the truth." "You've always been so stubborn," she said, but her voice had gone soft. The fight had gone out of it. "I learned it somewhere," I said. She made a sound that might have been a laugh. It might have been a sob. Maybe both. We talked for another hour, not about the apartment, just about other things. Smaller things, the way you do when 2 people are trying to figure out if there's still something between them worth tending to. By the time we hung up, nothing was resolved, but nothing was burning either. I think that was the best I could have hoped for. 3 months later, I ran into Dana at a grocery store near my hospital. She saw me first. I watched her decide whether to pretend she hadn't, and then she didn't, and she walked over with her basket on her arm and her expression carefully neutral. "Hi," she said. "Hi," I said. "We found a place," she offered. "A rental. In Concord. It's nice." "Good," I said. "I'm glad." She nodded. She seemed like she might say something else, and then she didn't. She gave me a small nod and moved on to the next aisle. I stood there for a moment holding my groceries, and I noticed I felt nothing dramatic. No triumph. No residual anger. Just the ordinary texture of a Tuesday afternoon in a grocery store. I went home. I made dinner. I sat on the couch in my apartment, the one I'd chosen and bought and furnished and paid for, and I watched the light go flat against the walls the way it does around 6 in the evening in November. The radiator knocked. The neighbor's dog barked twice and stopped. I thought about calling Renee to give her the update. I thought about a lot of things. What I kept coming back to was a conversation I'd had with one of my patients earlier that week. She was 67, recovering from a hip replacement, frustrated and frightened, and convinced she was going to be a burden to her children for the rest of her life. I'd sat with her for a few extra minutes at the end of my shift, and at some point she'd said, "I just don't want to take up too much space." I told her that taking up space wasn't the same as being a burden, that she'd earned her space, that she was allowed to be in it. I meant it for her. But sitting there in my apartment that evening, I realized I needed to hear it too. My mother and I have Sunday phone calls now. We don't talk about Marcus. We don't talk about the dinner, or the mortgage inquiry, or the suitcase that Dana wheeled through my door that Tuesday like she already lived here. Those things exist. We both know they exist. But we've agreed, without saying so, that they belong in the past tense. It's not perfect. It's not the warm, uncomplicated family relationship I used to pretend we had. But it's honest, and honesty with my mother feels like something I've been working toward my whole life without knowing it. Marcus and I don't speak. I don't know if that will change. I'm not waiting for it to. Renee came over for dinner a few weeks ago. We ate at my kitchen table, the one I'd found at an estate sale, and refinished myself. And she looked around the apartment the way she does sometimes, like she's taking an inventory of what I've built. "You doing okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "I actually am." She pointed her fork at me. "You know, most people just would have given in." "I know," I said. "So why didn't you?" I thought about it. The honest answer wasn't complicated. It wasn't about the apartment, not really. It wasn't about money or square footage or property values. It was about something much smaller and much more important than any of that. Because if I had, I said, they would have known they could do it again. Renee nodded slowly. "Yeah," she said. "That's the thing, isn't it? We finished dinner. I did the dishes. I locked the door out of habit when she left, and then I stood in the quiet of my apartment and listened to the ordinary sounds of a building full of people living their lives. My name is on the deed. My signature is on the closing documents. My down payment is in every page of the mortgage history. Nobody gave this to me. Nobody co-signed for it. Nobody's owed a single room of it. I built this. I protected it. And every morning I wake up inside it. I understand something I used to only half believe. Peace is not the absence of conflict. It's what you get when you finally stop letting other people define the terms of your own life. It doesn't come all at once. It comes in increments. A locked deadbolt. A document labeled. A door you close quietly without slamming because you don't need the noise anymore. You've already won. I've thought a lot about what I would have done if Renee hadn't told me to check my credit that night. If I'd just let the phone calls pile up, let my mother's version of events become the loudest one in the room, let Marcus and Dana settle into my spare bedroom the way they'd clearly planned to. I think about that alternate version of myself, the one who sighed and gave in and told herself it was only temporary, and I feel something close to grief for her. Because I know exactly how that story ends. Not with 3 months. With a precedent. With a family that had learned, once and for all, that if they pushed hard enough, I would move. What happened with Marcus and my mother wasn't a sudden thing. That's the part that took me the longest to accept. It was built slowly, over years of small moments I'd let pass without comment. Every time I covered a bill and didn't ask for it back. Every time I stayed quiet at a dinner table while my mother told a story where I was supporting cast in my own life. Every favor I gave freely because I didn't want to be the difficult one. None of those moments felt like choices at the time. They felt like just getting through the day. But they were adding up to something. They were building a picture of a person who could be counted on to absorb whatever the family needed, quietly, without complaint. The thing about cause and effect is that it doesn't announce itself. It just keeps its records. And eventually, if you're paying attention, you start to see the pattern in what's been collected. I was 31 years old. I had a nursing degree, 4 years of savings, and an apartment I'd bought by myself with no help and no cosigners. And the people who were supposed to be proudest of that were the same ones trying to route it through a mortgage application I never signed. That's not a coincidence. That's a consequence of years of me showing them that what was mine could be made available if they asked in the right way at the right moment with enough pressure applied. What I had to learn, and it wasn't comfortable to learn, was that protecting yourself isn't the same as being selfish. It took me a long time to separate those two things because in my family they'd always been treated as identical. Wanting to keep what you earned was framed as withholding. Having a boundary was framed as coldness. The moral vocabulary I grew up with had been arranged in a way that made generosity look like obligation and self-protection look like a character flaw. But here's what I actually believe now. Having lived through it, real integrity isn't about how much you're willing to give. It's about whether what you give comes from a genuine choice or from fear of what happens if you don't. My mother would say she raised me to be generous, and maybe she did. But she also, without meaning to, raised me to be afraid of her disappointment. Those two things lived side by side in me for years, and I couldn't always tell them apart. Claire didn't become someone hard. She didn't cut off her family and move to another city and never look back. She just stopped performing a version of herself that required her to shrink every time someone else needed more room. That distinction matters. The goal was never punishment. It was accuracy. An accurate account of what she'd built, what it cost, and what she was willing to protect. The folder I labeled control is still in my desk drawer. I don't look at it anymore. But I know it's there. And knowing it's there, and knowing I built that record calmly, without revenge in mind, just truth, is its own kind of quiet satisfaction. You don't have to set anything on fire to reclaim what's yours. Sometimes you just have to stop pretending it was ever shared to begin with.